Welcome back. If you had an emergency shelter buried in your backyard, stocked with enough food and water to live through a nuclear winter, who would be on your guest list for surviving Armageddon? And could you turn people away knowing that it meant almost certain death?
From a natural disaster standpoint, this is a fairly safe place to live.
In a worst-case scenario, Don and Charlene Zwanitzer wouldn't even need to make it to their backyard. They'd just close their 47-ton front door.
We have concrete support pillars every 18 feet to help support the 2-foot thick ceiling that we have.
Hal, are you feeling well today?
I feel great and I am ready to fulfill your every command.
With everything the Zwanitzers have accomplished underground,
Hal, tell us about the history.
This Atlas E missile site was built in the early 1960s. It was in service for about 2.5 years.
it can be easy to forget why they bought this place.
Probably things are going to get a bit challenging here in the near future based on the geopolitical situation. We know that in the scriptures and that it talks about the last days being pretty bad, if you read Revelation, etc. So I really wanted to get a place that would be secure for us as well as a good home.
The Zwanitzers believe that living far from America's coasts or urban centers provides some security in itself, but they're convinced that even out here, dangerous times are ahead, and they plan to be ready. Location is everything when you have to decide where to put the shelter that will protect you and your family in an emergency.
Depending on the situation or scenario, urban environments might be a difficult place to live and be safe in.
That's a diplomatic way of saying that in a crisis, your neighbors in the city could become your enemies.
We have a neighbor, they ride their horses up here, been riding up here for years, just kind of come up the trail there and passed within 50, 60 feet of this entrance and didn't even know it was here till I brought him up and let him tour the facilities.
People don't always act in a civilized manner. We saw some of that in New Orleans with Katrina. You know, not everybody was acting civilized. Not everyone was saying, hey, how can I help you? They were saying to their neighbor, give me what you've got.
You go in the house.
That's one reason why some of the friendliest people you will ever meet won't ever let it slip that they've got a shelter buried in the backyard.
Okay, the trench started about right here and ran over to where the border of the swing set is.
Paul Seyfried can't forget the day the crane lifted his shelter into the pit behind his house.
The day we put it in, we had some of the neighbors were sitting outside on their rooftops, you know, watching the goings on and eating potato chips.
But neighborhoods have a way of changing, and Seyfried almost never hears anything about his shelter from anyone on the block.
I imagine most of the people in this neighborhood have either forgotten or moved away, and the new people that moved in don't have a clue that I have a shelter, so it's no big deal.
Secrecy may be the most important component of the American shelter subculture.
Hopefully, we'll be able to go into the shelter, close the door, and not have to worry about, can we come in? Because the answer just has to be no. There's just not room. There's only so many supplies, and there's only so much room down here.
Peter Larson says his shelter is his life raft, and when a life raft is overloaded, everyone drowns. So as far as his neighbors are concerned, his backyard is no different than theirs.
Even if they walk up and look at the entrance, and the entrance is closed, it's shut, most people have no idea what that trapdoor goes to.
I've been toying with the idea of writing a stenciling on this hatch or someplace close on the cement, some kind of comment to indicate that might be hazardous here, like caution sewer gases may be present or something, you know, just to discourage anybody from getting too curious.
People who have shelters realize that it can sound pretty cold to say that their neighbors will just be out of luck if they come knocking on the shelter door.
We do everything in our power to help our neighbors. We certainly don't have all of our supplies in here. We have a lot of our supplies still in the house and in the basement and the garage. And I would essentially be turning those supplies over to the neighbors.
I have multiple shelters in different locations, and rather than have to confront someone, I would rather just leave and go to a remote area and wait out the problem.
I'll turn the others on down there.
The launch building is approximately 15,000 square feet. The command building is 5,000 square feet.
I'll move that out.
And what about the Zwanitzers living in that underground bunker with all that room?
We would certainly help anyone that needed help and was sincere about it. On the other hand, if some people were here trying to harm or hurt us, we would take action appropriately for that. So yes, our first priority is to help others.
With security cameras covering every inch of the Zwanitzer property, the welcome might seem a little less than enthusiastic. But on a regular basis,
okay, we got some visitors.
Don and Charlene break the shelter code of silence.
Hi, welcome to our house. I'm Charlene. I'm Jen
Welcome.
And I'm Deanna's wife.
The Zwanitzers give regular tours of the abandoned missile complex they call home.
We live down there. That's home sweet home on that end of the tunnel.
Don and Charlene say this is their way of helping more people than they could ever accommodate inside their shelter.
But we're going to show you where the missile was first, which is the other building. We do lots of tours. Let's go down through here. There's a couple step-overs as we go out. And the reason for those tours is we like to encourage people to get prepared. I think it's very important that they have at least 2 weeks of food and water.
Some months we have a lot of tours. One July we had 22 tours, and that month I did get a little tired of them. Didn't get anything else done but tours.
And hopefully we do it by example and not a whole lot of teaching and preaching type, but to encourage, and I think that's the goal. The more the people that are ready and prepared, the lot easier it's going to be on all of us if and when something does happen.
Just about all the sites were purchased by salvaging companies because when the sites were abandoned, the government took the missile and the computer and left everything else.
For virtually every visitor who comes here,
I'm blown away. I just can't believe they could do this with the facility they had here. I mean, it just is amazing.
We have 2 thermal solar collector systems.
there comes a moment when it's time to consider if they could live like this.
I would feel very secure here, but I think I would feel claustrophobic after a while too.
On that 45-degree ramp are shelves now with our produce growing in buckets with a drip system.
The idea of living in a shelter, even one as nice as this, is nearly unthinkable for some of them. Almost like denying the sense of community that binds people together.
You know, when you have something like this where you build it for long-term survival, and then when you come out, what are you going to face? So I guess I just take my chances with everybody else.
There's going to be a segment of society, a large segment of society, that won't do anything. And they'll expect the government to come along and take care of them. Or they just tend to live with their heads in the sand and figure it's just not going to happen. Or if it does, it's not going to affect us. And it's a pretty, quite frankly, it's a ridiculous attitude because none of us know what could happen.
There's been a fair amount of ridicule heaped on me from friends and family, as well as a few neighbors, thinking that this was just a foolish venture and not necessary.
Some people worry about the idea that they'll be labeled as an extremist or a fanatic or a fringe element of society, when in reality, most people don't look at it that way. You know, if you're doing something that makes sense, if you're putting aside some additional supplies in case there's an emergency, that's common sense.
The people who build shelters say they're getting interest for their product from places like Israel and Kuwait.
Home sweet home.
The people who own them point out that countries like Switzerland have an extensive shelter program. Most of all, they caution that the world is an unpredictable neighborhood.
Right now we have the former Soviet Union, Russia, starting to rebuild their military. They're starting to reenact some of their war games that were designed to deal with the United States. That seems a little provocative to me.
The Russians have thousands of nuclear warheads ready for immediate delivery. China is rapidly acquiring that ability, and Iran is working on it. And so I just feel the need to make sure that my family has immediate access to effective protection.
Despite the fear of being labeled fanatics, despite not wanting to advertise that they even have a shelter, the people who believe they will need to go underground someday say they don't want to go there alone.
Certainly what I would want to do is have people wake up to the fact that these shelters are available, that this can be done. It's worthwhile. And in many cases, it's just not that expensive to do.
And if their shelters are never used as anything other than places to escape from the world for a few hours, so much the better.
This is my family's security during hard times, and I hope that when I'm dead and gone that my family stands around my grave saying, well, look at all the money he wasted. I only have to be right once. And if I'm not right once by having something like this, I have to be lucky every day of my life.
Of course, the best thing would be if the shelters were never needed. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time on Witness.